And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show, ladies and gentlemen. And joining us once again is Jamelle Bouie, writer for the Daily Beast. Hello, Jamelle. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Okay, we got a lot to talk about, as is usually the case. You wrote a piece recently, I guess appeared today, or maybe that's when I printed it up. But anyway, about Bridgegate, and of course now it's gone a step further, where there's criticism of Governor Christie, actually an investigation that Congressman Pallone of New Jersey wanted launched about 6 months ago. So he says he's not piling on here now, where the commercials made in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, Jersey strong, showing the recovery of Jersey, and people should come back to the Jersey Shore and frequent their businesses. They paid, I think, a couple of more $1 million to one company than they could have paid to another, because this one company put Christie and his family in the commercials during campaign season, so that it smells a little fishy. So take that, combine it with Bridgegate, and tell me how you think this all affects Governor Christie.
I think it contributes to a view that's always been underneath the surface with regards to Governor Christie, that he is perhaps a little corrupt, perhaps there are dealings that are, unsavory. I know that a recent poll, and I forget off the top of my head who produced the poll, but a recent poll asked New Jersey voters if they thought Governor Christie had the temperament to be president, and those numbers have declined between last September and this month. So obviously this is taking some sort of toll on Governor Christie's image, though I will say that if, let's say, this investigation into the use of Sandy funds ends up being, a big nothing burger, let's say that it does turn out that Governor Christie did not really know much or didn't know anything about the decision to close the 3 lanes on the George Washington Bridge, I think, he recovers quite nicely. Voters don't really have long memories when it comes to this sort of thing. It sort of all hinges, what happened to Governor Christie all hinges on what he knew with regards to the George Washington Bridge, and, with regards to this new investigation, how much of this was untoward and how much it was just sort of like your run-of-the-mill politician wanting to make himself look a bit better.
Right. Well, the latest in the Jersey Shore TV ads, the aides to the governor say that the Obama administration approved of the New Jersey tourism ads, which starred Christie using federal relief money after Hurricane Sandy. They ran these ads, but that they were approved by the federal agency reviews. It says a routine and standard operating procedure with all federally allocated resources to ensure that the funds are distributed fairly. This, according to Christie's office. So again, if that's true, and if he knew nothing in advance about the bridge, and as a former U.S. attorney, he knows what kind of water he's getting himself into if he's lying about that. It would, and he also would have to know it would come out. So I'll have to work under that assumption, and I think he separates himself from Hillary, certainly from Obama also, which it doesn't really matter anymore, but from Hillary, who, sat there about Benghazi. I never saw the letter looking for more security. What difference does it make who did it? No one got fired. No one's held accountable. 4 dead Americans. To this day, we don't know who did it. And I think that's a stark contrast to the way Christie came out and handled this.
Sure. I mean, I think that contrast might matter to partisans. I'm not entirely sure how it would matter to voters who know, voters don't really know much about the Benghazi controversy. They don't really know much about the George Washington Bridge controversy. It's one of those things where if in 2 years we are in the middle of a Clinton versus Christie race, then maybe these things will be salient for supporters of both candidates, but I can't imagine them being particularly important to the mass of voters who aren't dedicated partisans on either side.
All right, we're talking to Jamelle Bouie here on the Steve Malzberg Show, writer for the Daily Beast. Another piece that you wrote talking about driving while black. You say, or the headline says that it's been proven driving while black is a real thing, and I guess you cite a study in San Diego, correct?
Right. I cite 2 things. The first is a report in San Diego by the Voice of San Diego news organization, showing that whereas 10 years ago the San Diego Police Department collected data on the racial composition of traffic stops, which is a reform that quickly sort of spread across the country. It no longer does so. And then I cited a second study showing that the rate for sort of routine traffic stops, like you're driving...
Speeding or driving with a broken brake, then being black has no influence.
Right. No, it has nothing to do with it.
So the disparity comes when cops are looking for suspects or looking for someone who might be involved in a crime, likely to commit a crime. Is that accurate?
Right. They're called investigative stops.
All right. Well, isn't it true that blacks commit a disproportionate amount of crime? So wouldn't it make sense that blacks would then be stopped at disproportionately higher amount?
So it depends. There's a lot you have to unpack there. It depends on the sort of crime we're talking about. But most of these investigative stops are about drug possession and drug use. You look like someone who may be trafficking drugs. In fact, African Americans are no more likely to be using drugs, trafficking drugs than their white counterparts. And especially in states with lower African American populations, it doesn't really make sense to stop blacks more than any other group. When it comes to violent crime, yes, there are higher rates of violent crime among African American communities relative to all white communities. But even then, let's say even in a generic neighborhood that's 90% black, even then, simply stopping all black people doesn't really tell you anything about who is committing crime, right? Like, there's going to be a specific population within that population who's committing crime.
Well, I understand, but in fairness, if the cops were doing this, and to me, racial profiling is just good police work, like gender profiling and automobile profiling. To me, racial harassment is terrible and against the law, and that's what they found happened on the Jersey Turnpike. It was so many years ago, and then it got defined as racial profiling. But profiling is what police do. Profiling is what we all do. It's what Jesse Jackson did when he said he breathed a sigh of relief. When he looked around, he saw the kids coming behind him were not black. I mean, that's profiling. We all do it in the supermarket. My point is, if these cops were just out to harass blacks, they'd be stopping them for the broken taillight. They'd be any excuse they can, but they're not. So when you say it's profiling, and this proves there's profiling, I take that as a bad context. But why is it bad if they're not harassing them for when they can be, but you say they're profiling them when it comes to looking for criminals? I don't get it.
Because this greater number of stops doesn't correspond with a similar number of actual hits, right? It'd be one thing if for every 3 stops you're making, you were getting 2 hits. If for every 4 stops you're making, you're getting 3 hits. But you're not getting anything like that. You see something similar in, I guess, stop and frisk programs around the country, that your positive contacts are very low, which actually makes sense, because when you're when you look at any sort of profiling, not just racial profiling, but any sort of profiling, and based on the demographic characteristic, you're not actually looking at the characteristic associated with the crime. Like, to say that young black men are more likely to commit crime really doesn't tell you anything, because there are a lot of young black men. And within the group, the category of young black men, let's say only 0.01% of them commit crime. So if you were to stop every young black man, let me continue. Yeah. If you were to stop every young black man, you would come up with a negative hit rate of 99.901, right, or 09, because the overall rate, the actual rate of crime committing, is very low. So that's sort of the reason why these things never really work out. Well,
I got 30 seconds left on a hard break, but I'll just say stop and frisk certainly has worked out, and the people's lives that stop and frisk in New York, for instance, has saved are black and minority lives to the tune of thousands a year, or hundreds and hundreds a year, that add up to thousands over the years that it's been used. But we'll come back. We'll continue with the data on stop and frisk if you want. But I appreciate you coming on as always, Jamelle Bouie. We'll read you at the Daily Beast. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, folks, we're coming back, and we're going to talk to Noah Rothman, editor and contributor, or columnist, I should say, from Mediaite.com, on the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and radio.
The Steve